Welcome back. All right, so we're going to talk about the Vegas Golden Knights as I continue rolling through the season previews. Now, first off, this is the 2023 Stanley Cup Champions Magnet. That's all I came out of Las Vegas with in terms of Stanley Cup stuff. I had really anticipated like Stanley Cup emblazoned merchandise everywhere, and yeah, it really has turned kind of generic. It's really kind of odd. There was other Stanley Cup stuff, but it's the same stuff I've seen on all the Fanatics websites. So good job, Fanatics, in destroying the creativity. So yeah, let's segue from that into the season they had, and they did win the Stanley Cup. So pretty easy for me to write out that portion of the board, right? Made the playoffs this year, won a round this year, and won the cup this year as well. They finished 51, 22, and 9. They were the best team in the West. They were fourth overall in the National Hockey League. They were very good throughout. They were consistently solid throughout the regular season into the postseason, and it just continued. They scored at a rate of 3.26 goals per game. They allowed 2.74. So again, key thing, goals for up, goals against down. You're probably going to win your share of games. It is just that simplistic, right? Power play and penalty kill. The power play 20.3%, so a little below average there. Penalty kill 77.4%. And in the playoffs, their special teams weren't fantastic either. They didn't need to be. 5-on-5, this was a really solid team. One thing the Vegas Golden Knights have done from day one, throughout all 6 of their seasons, make sure they have 4 lines, make sure they have a good top 6, and make sure that the first and second string goaltenders are solid. And in the event that your goaltending suffers injuries, you cover for it. It's something that, again, goes back to that first year. Marc-Andre Fleury, everybody remembers what a great year he had, sure, but there were a lot of injuries in net. They were all the way down to Dylan Ferguson at one point. So no offense to Dylan Ferguson, but that he was the last goaltender in their organization at that stage. So the cap space situation is not great for them. And so right with long-term injured reserve, Robin Lehner, and we still don't know what's going on with Lehner. But if he goes back on the LTIR, they have $851,683 in cap space. So really, according to Cap Friendly, there's no room there for them to bring anybody in, sign anybody up. So in the event that they wanted to bring back Phil Kessel, they'd have to get creative, or he'd have to take like league minimum, and even then, they'd probably have to do some working around in order to make it fit. Their top 5 scorers really show that this is by committee. There is no one great player on the Vegas Golden Knights. So you have Eichel, 67 games for him, 27 goals, 39 assists, 66 points. He's good for a point per game. And again, coming off of disc replacement surgery, there was a lot of discussion about how effective he would be. He's a very good player, and in the playoffs, he was excellent. So for Eichel, he might jump back up into that 40-goal range. He could end up in the 90-point range. I don't know if he ends up much higher than that. But again, in Vegas, he doesn't really need to be. Stevenson, 81 games, 16 goals, 49 assists, 65 points. Stevenson's really, in all honesty, at this point, an underpaid player. He's a very good player as well, and buys into this system that Vegas has. And ever since he arrived from Washington, he's done so. Marchessault, 76 games, 28 goals, 29 assists, 57 points. He had a Conn Smythe winning performance in the playoffs. But during the regular season, he's a very good top 6 forward. He just got hot at the right time during the playoffs. And again, he's one of the original misfits. And so you have to watch for him. You have to watch for Carlson. You no longer have to watch for Riley Smith, who has moved on to Pittsburgh. 78 games for him last season, 26 goals, 30 assists, 56 points. And it's a matter of who's going to replace him. My guess is Barbashev. Pietrangelo, 73 games, 11 goals, 43 assists, 54 points. Continues just rolling on through his career. He's got a couple of cup rings now. And is Pietrangelo getting into the conversation for being a potential Hall of Famer upon his retirement? I think he's getting there. Now, if he was able to win a Norris before he retired, that would help as well. I don't know if he's in that category any longer. But again, in Vegas, he doesn't have to be. You don't have to be the number one guy. You look, Pietrangelo's there, Theodore's there as well. They have multiple players who can be the guy when they need him to be. And this is also epitomized by their goaltending. Logan Thompson got hurt. Logan Thompson didn't play during the playoffs. He played 37 regular season games, 21-13-3, 915 save percentage, played in the All-Star game, was in the running for Rookie of the Year up until he got injured. And then there's Adin Hill, 27 games, 16-7-1, 915 save percentage, gets red hot in the playoffs when he takes over from Logan Brossoit, and before you know it, Adin Hill's got himself a cup ring, and he's got himself a pretty hefty extension with the Vegas Golden Knights. Bressois, on the other hand, played 11 games for Vegas. 7-0-3 record, 927 save percentage. So there's a pattern here, right? Goaltenders who are unheralded in Vegas putting up really good numbers. Jonathan Quick came in at the deadline, of course, 10 games, 5-2-2 record, 901 save percentage. So his save percentage, not great, but Quick, I thought, had some good games for them. He moves on, of course, to the New York Rangers. And Yuri Patera played 2 games. He won both of them. He had a 929 save percentage. So the lowest save percentage for a goaltender, Quick's 901, but outside of that, 915 is the minimum. And it didn't seem to matter who was in net. So while Adin Hill had a great run, I don't think that if Thompson was in the net, they wouldn't have won the Cup. I don't think that if Bressois stayed in the net, they wouldn't have won the Cup because Vegas was pretty convincing in each round. So that convincing in the Stanley Cup win has clearly convinced the channel that they're going to stay at or near the top. 75% of the vote went to Vegas being first or second in the division. 21% of the vote said third or fourth. And 4% probably just don't like Vegas. 5th or 6th, 1% of the vote there. 7th or 8th, 3% of the vote. They'd have to be behind either Anaheim or San Jose for that math to work. I can't get there. I can't. I can't. There's just, it'd have to be some kind of a shrink ray accident. Like, I can't get there. Their hits leader this past season was Keegan Colasar, 279 hits. So this is a team that has been a hard-hitting team in the past. They're not as much in that vein as they were, but Colasar can still throw them. Block shots, Alec Martinez, one of the best all time, and he put up 244 block shots. Despite the injuries he suffered over the seasons, he's probably bumped and bruised all the way through the year, and he still drops in front of those shots. He's a courageous player. Most posts hit, William Karlsson hit 8. William Karlsson, of course, an original member of the Misfits crew, and might be counted on a little bit more this season. We'll see. So when you get to additions and exits, this is where things are interesting. The additions, none of any kind of consequence. But the exits, Riley Smith leaves, Lauren Bressois, and Jonathan Quick. I caught myself on that one. I did. I still expect the comments. Phil Kessel and, of course, Teddy Bluger. Teddy Bluger came over at the deadline from Pittsburgh. And again, there was no cap space there for them to re-sign Bluger if they wanted to. But Bluger's somebody they can replace from within as well. Now, for the next one on this team, I'm going with Dorofeev. I like Dorofeev's game a lot. And with the exit of Smith, there's an opening on the roster. Even though Barbashev does probably take his spot, there's an opening there for Dorofeev, and I hope he takes it. Fantasy sleeper, I went with Cotter. Hard worker, Paul Cotter, and I hope he gets that opportunity to play a little more, play maybe on a third line here and there. I do like his work ethic a lot, and we'll see whether or not that translates to some goals and points this year. The MVP, I went with Eichel. I took the easy way out with that one. Although Theodore can get that argument, Pietrangelo can get that argument. And honestly, again, looking at this team and how they won the Stanley Cup, it was really and truly a team effort. You couldn't shut one guy down and say, well, now Vegas is in trouble because they shut down Eichel. Oh, Vegas is in trouble. They shut down Marsh. So there wasn't that one player. A player can go cold, but everybody else can pick it up and get those points and goals. So one thing that Vegas was credited for showing was, well, you don't need a $10 million goaltender to win a Stanley Cup. Right. You do have a $10 million forward. And you need depth. You need a lot of depth up front. You need depth on the blue line, and you need competent goaltending. So that's, I think, the lesson from the Vegas Golden Knights is you need to have all of that. Their schedule, 6 of the first 10 are at home. All of the 10 games in October are at home. They weren't as good at home as they were on the road. So I've seen comments about which teams were good on the road, which teams were good at home this past season. The funny thing is, from one year to the next, that really does not carry over. A team can be a road warrior one year, and the next year they're terrible on the road, and vice versa. They can be great at home one year and lousy the next. So I just look at it where everything is equal before the season gets started, and I look at a team and say they play a lot on the road. That's going to be a challenge, even if they had a great road record last year. So I don't look at Vegas and say, well, they didn't have a great record at the Fortress last year, so they're probably going to get off to a slow start. That seems kind of silly. So 6 of 10 being at home in October, that should work to their benefit. So most of the core is still here. So while there weren't any additions to this roster, there's nothing that really strengthens it from outside. From within, they should be able to maintain the kind of record they had this past season. Maybe they fall off a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be very much. They kept Barbashev, and that decision cost them Riley Smith. That really it was a matter of whether or not they were going to keep Smith or Barbashev, and they chose Barbashev. Barbashev's the younger forward. I think he's going to score more goals out of the two this season, and I think he had instant chemistry in Las Vegas, so makes total sense that the Golden Knights would keep him. Marchessault, Martinez, both of those players are UFAs next summer, so we might see a really good year from Marchessault. We might see Martinez blocking even more shots as he looks for a new contract, unless Martinez decides this is his last year. Who knows? Again, once you've won that Stanley Cup, I think there's some feeling of mission accomplished, and maybe it's easier to look at your career and say, you know what, I can walk away now. For Martinez, it's not his first cup ring either, it's his third, so again, pretty solid resume for him throughout his career. They didn't sacrifice any first round picks. So, of course, every trade deadline comes and goes, and we talk about what teams gave up. They didn't give up a first round pick this past year, and they have all of their first round picks going forward, meaning if they want to this year at the deadline, they could use a first round pick either to get themselves the necessary cap space or just to improve their roster, maybe dollar out, dollar in, and using that first round pick to, as a sweetener in order to improve the trade for the team they're trading with. But yeah, it's interesting because we often see first round picks just thrown around like crazy. Vegas has stopped doing that, so I give them full credit for that. I thought they did a little bit too much early in their existence. So this is a team that's had a lot of success, right? 6 years into their existence, they've won a Stanley Cup. They also appeared in a different Stanley Cup final, and of the 6 seasons, 4 times they've been amongst the final 4 teams standing. So they did have the first round upset they suffered against San Jose. They did miss the playoffs in 2022. In that season, a large part of that due to injury. But then they brought in Bruce Cassidy. Things turn around. Now Cassidy's going into his second season. He definitely, I felt like he had a chip on his shoulder this past year after Boston decided to move him and bring in Montgomery. And I think that translated to some results in the playoffs. So Vegas is in an interesting spot too. They're 54-34 all time in the playoffs. That's a ridiculous record. Again, they're only 6 years into their existence. So a lot of success, a lot of pressure, but they deal with it quite well. And again, when you have a team that's not focused around just one player, up front, in the net, on the blue line, I think it's easier. And I think I think one thing too, with the Stanley Cup win, it kind of justifies the ruthlessness. And it does. It kind of justifies everything they've done when it comes to all of we're bringing this guy in, they get a guy, they sign him, and then they just trade him. They need cap space. And, Fleury, the way that his exit went wasn't pretty. But the Stanley Cup win kind of shows, hey, they did what they had to do. The Pacioretty trade, again, doing what they had to do. And in the end, it's justified with a Stanley Cup victory. It'll be interesting to see if any other team copies that. I don't think any other team's necessarily going to, but it is a copycat league at times. We shall see. One thing that I do wonder, and he's not on the board because he missed half the season, but Mark Stone, I do wonder if this year we're going to see him getting some Selke consideration. He would have to stay healthy for that, of course. There's been rumors about his back. He says it's 100%. Vegas says it's 100%. There's been speculation about whether or not he's going to have to rest at times during the year because of his ongoing back problems. Definitely during the playoffs, it felt like there were a lot of teams that were taking liberties with Stone and his back injury with extra oomph in their cross-checks and going for the lower back and all of that. But yeah, Mark Stone has been an absolute warrior for the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think if he played center rather than on the wing, he'd get a lot more consideration for Selke. I would overlook it. The one thing with Stone, and I said this when I was in Anaheim last week at the meetup, the most impressive thing with Stone for me is the amount of times that he steals a puck, the amount of times he goes into a corner and gets it, and he doesn't take a penalty doing it. Being able to play that well defensively and doing it clean, without slashing, without hooking, without holding, it really is truly impressive. And he doesn't steal the puck off nobody's either. He gets some of the toughest matchups in the league, and he does it quite well. So, I think Stone's one of the best players in the league. And, when we talk about the Vegas Golden Knights, He is a very important player, and being activated in time for the playoffs definitely seemed to make a difference. That being said, there is no one player in Vegas that I feel like all of their fortunes are built around. But let me know your thoughts on that. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Can this team repeat? My answer to that would be they can, absolutely. Most of the pieces are still here. And again, they've shown that they play. It's a four-line team. It's all scoring by committee. It's defense by committee. Everybody buys in. It is tough to beat a team playing that way. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.